So, in my experience, the worst part of any job I've ever worked at by far is performance reviews. I've never had a good experience with one. I've never had a neutral experience with one. I've never even had a neutral experience with one. Every experience I've ever had with performance reviews have been painful, demoralizing, unpleasant, generally speaking, unhelpful. They're in general when I'm gonna go to one, I'll often take some of my I'll take an extra dose of antidepressants or I'll take some of my sleeping meds just to get through them. And I guess for those of you who are still in school or work blue collar jobs, I don't know if they have them at those, at least in the same way or not. But how you would think it would go is it would kind of be like how you evaluated things back in school. You do a PMI, a plus minus, and interesting. So that would be they sit you down, they talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, what you need to keep doing, what you need to improve upon, that sort of thing. And try to work with you to come up with some sort of plan going forward and what you could do differently. Now, in my experience, that's not the case at all. I find, generally speaking, performance reviews are 80 to 90% or sometimes more negative. I don't know if I've ever really gotten positive feedback. The most positive feedback I've ever gotten is that you're loyal and dedicated to the company. Like, I remember at one company I worked at, they're like, you're loyal and dedicated to the company, and that was all the positive feedback. And then it was like over an hour of just listing like everything I had done wrong for the past 6 months or something like that. And I get that it's important to be able to take criticism and that's important to improve and to learn from your mistakes and something. I think there has to be some balance though. I don't think the way it's done, at least in my experience, of only providing negative feedback, of only telling people what they do wrong, is a like productive way of motivating people. Because I mean, if you're basically told everything you do sucks, everything you do is wrong, then it's overwhelming. There's not really an obvious place to start improving. It's like what's even the point of trying to do things differently or try to do things better if all the kind of the feedback you get is negative. It also kind of discourages people from doing positive things. So if they're good at something and you don't like explain that to them, they might stop doing it as part of the criticism that they're receiving. And I personally don't think the purpose of performance reviews is to help the employee or to make them more efficient. I think the purpose is to provide a paper trail so when you decide to fire them, you can hopefully deny them severance. I think the other aspect of it is it's to give a reason to deny them a raise or a bonus or something else. I think it's also to rule through fear. So if you scare them because it's a tough job market in a lot of professions at the moment, um, then they'll work harder or they'll go and pay for their own training or they'll solve the problem themselves. And you don't have to be involved with it and you don't have to do anything to try to make things work. So I don't think that that's the point of them. Like I don't think it's there to be a productive, at least in most cases, there to be a productive experience, there to provide actual feedback. I think it's there to intimidate employees and to set it up where you can deny them raises. And this kind of comes back to a broader issue I have with a lot of corporate culture. I find there tends to be this encouragement of managers and employees in like adversarial roles, that they're actively like fighting each other and that it's like a game between the two of them. And I just really hate that kind of thing. I'm much more of like a team player and I prefer like a team mutually supportive environment. And I just it doesn't motivate me and it's not helpful if basically the performance review is just you suck. And part of it is, and this is kind of the sleazy aspect, a lot of the time they just save stuff up and they don't talk to you about it throughout the year. They just kind of make like a list of like often petty grudges, and then at the performance reviews they just throw it at you. Um they just uh like go through all this stuff, and they never reference, like I said, they'll occasionally give you positive feedback. Like if you do a project, they'll be like, thanks for getting it done, this looks great, I appreciate it, that kind of thing. And then like at your performance review they'll be like, no, it was garbage, it was all really bad, and we were, I guess, being dishonest when we told you it was good. And once again, it's just like, how is that motivating? How does that create a sense of trust, of teamwork, of that kind of thing? There's also a part of performance reviews that I think is designed as a trap. In general, I see whenever you're asked to give feedback as a trap set by management to try to figure out who's disloyal or to figure out who the problem employees are. I don't think the purpose of it is fundamentally to try to work with employees. I think the purpose of it is to kind of adjust the environment. I don't know, to increase the amount of fear or something like that. There's also, I think, this idea that you should have an adversarial relationship with your coworkers and your manager. I just find, generally speaking, people don't like teamwork. They don't like being a team player. If being a team player and asking someone else for help is an admission that you're lazy and weak and that you're kind of the dead weight in the organization. So I find that's the case. I also find how a lot of companies work is if they want talent, they'll hire it from the outside. And they aren't interested in developing it internally, I guess because that costs too much money. Maybe going back to a previous topic, they'll often ask, what can we do to help you? And I, generally speaking, try to come up with some like actual stuff. Generally speaking, there is bad communication. I know at several jobs I've been at, they've asked me why I've done things, and I've said I did it because that's how you told me to do it, and I'll present like the evidence. And they'll be like, oh, okay, well, you shouldn't have. Well, they don't really generally provide me with an answer. Like if I copy the email format or the presentation format or something like that, they'll be like, well, we didn't want you to do that, even though we told you that we want you to do that. And sometimes what it is they'll have an internal conversation that they won't tell you about, but they'll assume that you're aware of it or something. Like an example of this is at one of the previous companies I worked at, my boss would never send existing emails, would never send fresh emails. She would just respond to one. Even if it's not relevant, she didn't like to send new emails. So I thought that was basically how things work there. And during my performance review, she's like, you're very lazy because you only respond to emails and you don't send fresh ones. And I'm like, well, that's because you do that. And she's like, oh, yeah, I guess I can see how you'd get that impression. It's kind of like, why didn't you just mention that earlier? Why did that have to wait until like 3 or 4 months later and then just kind of have it dumped on you? And I find like one of the most humiliating parts is they're always like, what what is your plan to like improve it? And they never give you suggestions beyond just work harder or be more careful, at least in my experience. And it's like we have all this wealth of experience and knowledge and stuff, and you have to tell us like what part of that can help you. And it's like, well, if I knew that, I'd ask. I mean, isn't this supposed to be like a team sport? But it, generally speaking, isn't supposed to be a team sport, at least not in my experience. It's supposed to be kind of an adversarial environment where I don't know if they just think that that's like competition, that it makes things better. I find in my experience it doesn't. I think the whole concept is shit. I think that they need to be more balanced, where they both provide criticism and positive feedback, and they actually try to come up with like plans rather than just tearing people down. But in general, like I said, performance reviews are shit. I hate going through them. I think it destroys morale. I don't know. I think managerial culture sucks. I've been pretty adamant about this for a long time now. That's about all I have to say. So, God bless, and I'll talk to you guys later.